Hello, hello class. This is Dr. Branch. I'm going to talk to you for just a few moments about natural law and give you a very brief introduction to this topic. You need to know that natural law is a very complex issue with lots of different definitions and competing ideas. So I'm only giving you a cursory introduction, but by God's grace, this will be of some help to you. Just a couple of examples of how these sort of ideas pop up. As we'll see in just a few moments, natural rights flow from the idea of natural law. And in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson makes reference to self-evident truths and certain inalienable rights. And then in our own generation, about 50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King, in a letter from Birmingham jail, referred to natural law and said, an unjust law is no law at all, as he was opposing racist laws in Alabama at that time. So what is natural law? So here's a definition. There are lots of them. I like this one. This one differs just a bit from what you'll read in either of your textbooks, either from Art Holmes or Scott Ray, but I like this definition. Natural law can be defined as a moral order divinely implanted in humankind and accessible to all persons through human reason. Each of these parts of this definition is important, as you'll see in just a moment when we talk about Aquinas. The whole idea is that unaided human reason can arrive at this natural law, and it's a moral order. It refers to ethics. Here's how Scott Ray defined it. Natural law is simply general revelation in the area of moral values. So when we talk about it, we're not referring to the sort of natural law that science tries to describe, such as an apple falling from a tree or something like that. Some different views. I'm going to scoot through these very quickly. The whole idea of natural law begins with Aristotle. Aristotle believed there was a purpose or a goal, an end to which everything was designed, which was inherent within the purpose of everything. So this is kind of the start of natural law. There's a purpose or a goal which humans should be pursuing. The Stoics picked up on this. Natural law was what reason prescribes for harmonious and just ordering of society. And again, the Stoics assumed we are rational beings, and that, much like Aristotle, we can rationally or through human reason determine what natural law requires. Now, the Stoics were influential in the period of transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. And so Rome's dealing with this issue, how do we govern this widespread empire with people from all these different cultures? That leads us to Cicero. So Cicero, a great Roman thinker, was wrestling with the idea that Rome was a diverse empire. So he suggested that we have a common, or that they have a common legal core, the Roman Code. In this Roman Code, he said, true law is right reason and agreement with nature. It is of universal application, unchanging and everlasting. Do you see that? So that's universal, it's everlasting. That means it doesn't change. It summons to duty by its commands and averts from wrongdoing by its prohibitions. And this is an idea that took hold in the early Roman Empire. Skip forward several centuries, Aquinas, building on Aristotle, and he follows Aristotle in thinking that an act is good or bad depending on whether it contributes or deters us from our proper human purpose. So again, he believes there's a purpose or a goal for human life. And so natural law is that moral ordering that helps people find their purpose. It's rooted in God's eternal law and can be deduced via human reason. So here you see the connection with Aristotle. He's using human reason to do this. And this leads to modern Roman Catholicism. Modern Roman Catholicism has a rich tradition in natural law theory that pops up in lots of places. So I want to just clarify for you, the terms natural law and natural rights are frequently used interchangeably. But technically they refer to two different things. Natural law actually gave rise to the concept of natural rights. In particular, John Locke argued that human beings in the state of nature are free and equal, yet we are insecure in our freedom. Thus, this is kind of how societies get formed, is in order to secure certain freedoms. But when you form a society, you only surrender such rights as are necessary for their security and for the common good. So this natural rights are different from natural law. They are derived from natural law. Now let's go into a bit more detail about Aquinas and natural law. I have a diagram here for you I got from Ronald Nash. And so he's talking about how these different ideas of law, 4 ideas of law that occur in Aquinas, how they overlap. And so let's try to walk through these. First of all, there's eternal law. This is the unchanging reason of God. It's God's plan for the universe. And this affects everything, including irrational creatures like dogs or cats, especially cats. And he says, now it is evident, granted that the world is ruled by divine providence, that the whole community of the universe is governed by divine reason. So that's the eternal law, which leads to the divine law. That is God's eternal law communicated to humans through special revelation like the Bible or in the teachings of Jesus Christ. It applies to religion and church issues, and it's apprehended through special revelation. You only understand the divine law through the special revelation of Scripture or Christ. This leads to natural law. Natural law is the part of eternal law that applies exclusively to humans. Natural law is one of the ways by which humans participate in the eternal law, and it has a special focus on ethics, about morality. Here's what Nash said: the natural law is written on the human heart. It is grounded in human nature. The content of the natural law corresponds to humankind's basic inclinations when they are not corrupted or impeded by sin. So the natural law is basically the eternal law that gets etched upon the human mind. It is uniquely for humans, not for animals. And it determines the telos, the goal, the end for which we should live, and it helps us seek the essential human purpose. Here's what Aquinas said: now among all others, the rational creature is subject to divine providence in the most excellent way, insofar as it partakes of a share of providence by being provident both for itself and for others. Wherefore it has a share of the eternal reason, whereby it has a natural inclination to its proper act and end, and this participation of the eternal law in the rational creature is called the natural law. So it operates in 2 ways. It appeals to one's reason so one can know how to act in particular circumstances, and it also appeals to human law. The human law, to be true, it has to follow natural law. And for a true human law, its purpose is to help one fulfill his or her goal, the purpose for life, to fulfill one's function as a rational creature, and to seek out a vision of God. If human law deviates from natural law, it is non-binding. And here's a famous quote from Aquinas: a tyrannical government is not just because it is directed not to the common good. This is the idea of purpose or goal that humanity has designed within it, but to the private good of the rule, as the philosopher states. Consequently, there is no sedition in disturbing a government of this kind. Do you see how these sort of ideas were picked up by folks in the American Revolution? Unless indeed the tyrant's rule be disturbed so inordinately that his subjects suffer greater harm from the consequent disturbance, that means revolution, than from the tyrant's government. So you see how these ideas were influential in American thought. Dr. King famously said, quoting Aquinas, an unjust law is no law at all, in letter from Birmingham jail. So human law as its own goal. Political authority in human law must obey God and natural law. So for a law to be good, it has to obey God's law. So let me give you just a quick word on secular pushback. I don't want to say a lot about this. It's just legal positivism. I don't even know if I'll have it on the midterm, but here's what it is. It's basically a theory of secular people that says, well, there is no such thing as natural law, but instead what you have is human laws are just a social construction. They're just developed by humans merely for whatever purpose they have at that given time. There's no transcendent moral rule. So some critiques of legal positivism, it really leads you with little recourse in the face of immoral or unjust laws. If these are just, well, that what is what is, then we have no real moral standing to critique some evil laws, such as the Nazi persecution of Jews. The protection of human rights is impossible unless those rights are protected by positive laws that reflect the content of natural laws. So if you don't have a natural law that purports to defend the rights of innocent humans, then it just becomes might makes right. But also, we're going to see in just a second, the Bible teaches about a general revelation of moral law accessible to all people at all times, and to which we are all held accountable. So let me give you a couple of arguments for and against natural law, and we'll be done. First, some arguments in favor of natural law. First is Romans 2:14 through 15, which talks about this law written on the heart of man. And then the existence of commonly accepted moral terms. Generally, when you talk about right and wrong and good and evil, most people know what you're talking about. This seems to indicate that there is some commonality in the way humans do ethical reflection. And then the trajectory of Scripture. You have pagan nations in the Old Testament which are held accountable, and then in the New Testament and the book of Revelation, Great White Throne, all people everywhere are held morally accountable, even if they don't have special revelation, which seems to indicate some sort of natural law. But there are some critiques, specifically the Reformers. Just if some of you guys have an interest in Reformation theology, I will tell you natural law did not fare so well with them. So the reason is human sin. So the common critique of Aquinas is he does not accept the degree to which human sinfulness has impeded the ability of human reason to work correctly. But then also it's just the centrality of the Bible. Carl F. H. Henry, a famous Baptist theologian, stressed that the special revelation of Scripture answers the epistemological problem of ethics. How do we know right and wrong? Some secular people have also pointed out Hume's is-ought objection, which I brought up earlier in another lecture, that you can't get a metaphysical transcendent moral rule from an empirical observation. Now, I have some problems with Hume's argument here, and I would just alert you to the fact that some people bring up Hume's is-ought objection. Even some Christians who don't agree with Hume on many things will bring up this is-ought objection at many points. So there's sin, the centrality of the Bible. These are the two main ones of the Reformers. This third one just depends on which one you're reading. So the question, other thing I would say is, it's not immediately obvious to me that in Romans 2:14 through 15 that Paul is describing the same thing as Aquinas is describing when Aquinas describes natural law. Obviously, Paul is referring to universal moral accountability, a certain amount of moral awareness of all humans everywhere. So obviously he's driving at that, this law on the heart. But the degree to which that is equivalent to all the philosophical definitions of natural law is not immediately obvious to me. So here's what Carl F. H. Henry said in 1995. He said, Christianity offers no speculative theory of ethics that renders certain courses of action personally and socially obligatory. The existence and priority of God known in his revelation, that's the Bible, is its basic affirmation. Speculative views may consider the existence or non-existence of God irrelevant to ethical concerns. But for evangelical Christianity, the content of morality turns on divine revelation in the Bible. One reason Protestant orthodoxy in the past has not devoted itself extensively to speculative morality is that it does not derive the essential content of ethics from philosophical reasoning, but from rational revelation, and he means special revelation. So what Henry says by philosophical reasoning, he has natural law in mind there. And he says we as Christians don't primarily go to natural law for the source of our ethics, but we go to the Bible. And I have to tell you, I agree. So here's my summary. To some degree, transcendent moral truth is available to humanity. The degree to which this is equivalent to what is called natural law is a matter of debate. At the same time, I would warn us all that the human heart can become hard and the conscience seared to such a degree that an individual is no longer able to perceive common moral truths. Special revelation, Scripture, Jesus Christ, provide the epistemological answer for how we know right and wrong and the content of moral law. Perhaps this will give you some insight and just a brief survey and introduction to some key ideas related to natural law.